A kickstart and energetic morning to each one of you. I hope you all are doing well and the weekend vibes have started kicking in. Let's make it more powerful and motivational with today's session. I, Mahima Sindhi, on behalf of the entire MMDU family, extend a hearty welcome to each one of you to our series of live sessions where we bring expert professionals and celebrated artists on board to share their pearls of wisdom and their juices of life experiences to learn from. In the words of David Hume, the law always limits every power it gives. Therefore, one should use it wisely, since injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Let us all get an insight on commercial disputes and international arbitration practice at Indian law firms and virtually taste the fruits of life voyage of none other than a principal associate at Khitan and Co. and a seasoned commercial disputes lawyer, Ms. Shruti Khanijow. We will get to have ma'am on the screen after a short break.
पापा
हम्म?
ये थोड़ा मेरी तरफ से।
ओ बेटा बाप को पैसे दे रहा है।
अरे नहीं पापा, इट्स जस्ट अ थैंक्स।
किस बात का?
वो आपने कहा था ना, कहाँ पढ़ना है वो फैसला बड़ा होता है। जिंदगी के 4 साल का सवाल नहीं, सवाल पूरी जिंदगी का है।
Maharishi Markandeshwar deemed to be University, Maulana Ambala, preparing you for the real world.
I would take this opportunity to formally introduce ma'am once we have her on screen. May I request the backend team to have ma'am added on the screen, please? Hello, ma'am. Warm greetings.
Hi Mahima. Hi everyone.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much, ma'am. So let me take this opportunity to formally introduce you. Ms.Shruti Khanijow, a principal associate at Khitan and Co. and commercial disputes lawyer based out of New Delhi, India. Ms. Khanijow has represented private parties and state entities in institutional and ad hoc arbitrations seated in India and abroad. Ma'am is experienced in advising clients on construction and energy arbitrations, shareholder disputes, product liability litigation, corporate criminal liability, and disparagement and defamation claims. She extensively advises clients on drafting and negotiating jurisdiction and arbitration agreements. Ms. Shruti has had the privilege to work as a law clerk to the then Chief Justice of India, Honorable Mr. Justice H.L. Dattu, an LLM in international law from University of Cambridge. She has been on the editorial board of Cambridge International Law Journal and Cambridge Law Review. She's also represented Hughes Hall, University of Cambridge, before the president of Armenia as a visiting scholar and young law expert at Lewis Foundation, Armenia. Let us discover some insights of her inspiring journey. So, ma'am, I have received a couple of questions. I will keep asking you those questions, and via that, we'll get to know more about you and the expertise that you hold. So, the
Mm.
first question that I have for you, ma'am, is how has your journey been so far? So, how did you land up into this career, and did you always know that you wanted to be a lawyer, or did you depict some different traits while you were a child, and that's how you discovered? We'd like to know that, please.
Thank you for the question, and again, hello everybody. I think this is a very good question, and there's no, I've never introspected it personally to give an answer to anybody else for that matter. But I don't think I wanted to be a lawyer for the entirety of my childhood. I think law was something which I got interested in somehow between the age of 15 to 17. That's because I really enjoyed reading civics, and back then I went to an ICSE school. We had a specific subject called civics, which was more about civil society. I'm sure, I mean, one of you must have read it. It's
Sorry, yeah,
quite
I
some
was
time
also
back.
correct. I was an ICIC student, so I can relate civics hovering all over. I was never into civics, so probably that's the idea I have of it. But please continue.
Yeah, I think I was one of those people who were. Instead of history, I quite enjoyed reading civics. And then I realized, perhaps the Constitution of India, I'd pick it up from my dad's library and I'll see it really made sense to me, and it gave you a sense of purpose to see what the country is all about, how it's governed. I mean, that was my introduction to what exactly might entail when you read law. And overall, I've been a very. I used to be a quizzer back in school, So that also gave me a lot more insight into what law may entail and how how the civil society functions, how public institutions function, how a country is governed. And I saw law as something that I may be able to take up later, and there's a natural inclination to do something for the society in that sense. But then, regardless of that, I wanted to be a doctor. I gave the exams, I got through a couple of universities, and then I realized that, perhaps I must choose law because that's something which I personally relate to.
Right.
And thankfully, I did get through one or two of the law schools that I'd also applied to, and that's how my career in law started. Uh, in fact, my education in law started there. The education in law was quite intensive. At the beginning of it, I did not know what I really wanted to do. What I knew was that I wanted to do well at law school because I was told that's the short way of doing at least decently well in your life. I
Right.
mean, I did not want to end up confused after law school, which is exactly what I did end up getting. But let's be honest that there are different parts of your life you enjoy. So my purpose was to enjoy the best of what I can out of law school. Then I also wanted to read everything very deeply. That's something which I'm interested in. So, be it environmental law, be it Companies Act, be it Contracts Act, or insurance law for that matter, or something very, very different, which could be constitutional law. I read all of them particularly deeply at law school, and I quite enjoyed it, truth be told. I was also very interested in jurisprudence. You had a quote from in the
What's the name?
beginning. Yeah. So I just realized that there are a lot of aspects which I did end up reading, and all of them contributed and merged together to help me see that I gravitate more towards commercial law because that's something which calls out and interests me much more than anything else.
Right.
So after I graduated out of law school, I did join a corporate law firm initially, but after a period of about 3 4 months, I transcended and transitioned to clerkship, which was offered to me at that time. That clerkship gave me a much more better insight on what exactly are the kind of disputes, because as a law student you in turn perhaps you read things very academically, you may be interested deeply going into an academic pure law perspective, but you're not very sure of how that actually plays out in the real world, so all your ideas are quite you know esoteric. It's not
Correct.
very correct, and it's not very landed and grounded into what the reality entails. So I think clerkship was one of those experiences for me. It really helped me figure out what exactly entails real life practice. So for about a period of 3 years, I worked. I got an opportunity to read a lot of very very interesting briefs from different parts of the country to see what exactly are the kind of laws that exist, from felling of trees for 50,000 rupees to, let's say, an act called the Lifts Act was something that I came across. I also had an opportunity to basically to see the arguments happen and perhaps assist the judge I was working with for a very important case like Mulla Periyar Dam, and amongst others. There are other matters also. So I got a very high range and wide range of opportunity at a very young age, and that gave me a lot more perspective to understand what exactly Indian legal system is, how does it operate from the top, and that just makes you understand and figure out what is the kind of law that you want to practice. You also get an opportunity to see the top lawyers of the country. You work with the brightest legal minds, you see what to do, what not to do. You see the top level of advocacy. You see the
Yeah.
best drafts that can come up. You see the products of best lawyers, the best lawyers from both sides, advocacy and soliciting, the
Yeah.
lawyers who do draft. And then you also see the advisories that may go wrong. You see how the strategies in any case can go extremely right, extremely wrong. What is the point where the case absolutely turned around?
Right.
And that also gives you an insight to see how the Supreme Court is the final court of law, and what are things that you should not do for your client when you're in active practice to land up there in the wrong way. I mean, of
Right.
course, we all learn on the way, but that was a great learning that I had, at least for a lot of couple of for about 3 years at the Supreme Court. After the Supreme Court, I did realize that I wanted to do international arbitration, and that didn't come out from the clerkship per se. I did a lot of moots back at law school, which were arbitration related moots. I published a lot in the subject. Then I was during the clerkship also. There were a lot of international arbitration matters that did that I had the opportunity of working on. So
Right.
overall, I gravitated towards that commercial arbitration, and the best place to do that, according to me, was a law firm because you start from scratch. Pre-dispute stage is where you start in a commercial dispute, and then you move on to, at least at a law firm, you have the opportunity to of tracing that dispute throughout its life.
Correct. And you keep progressing, I believe,
Yeah,
because you've seen it from the scratch, right?
yeah. So in that sense, you have a complete perspective, which I did not have earlier at the clerkship, or in fact at the previous law firm where I was doing commercial law, transactional practice. That gave me a lot more perspective, and this is what I wanted to learn. How do I draft something at the tribunal stage? How does it progress? What happens when it goes into appeal? And what happens ultimately in the matter because of the strategy that I worked on even before the dispute started. So
Correct.
that is a range of things that I wanted to look at, and that's why international arbitration practice at a big law firm really helped me understand that. After that, I mean, of course, you already mentioned I did go to Cambridge. I studied private international law mostly. It involved commercial litigation, international commercial litigation, international environmental law, international investment arbitration, and a couple of other subjects that involved law of global governance, how UN bodies, how ICJ functions. And it was a very interesting mix of international tax and other subjects. So it gave me a lot more perspective. More than law, what Cambridge gave me was exposure to different fields of law, different peer group. It also gave me a lot more insight into how other jurisdictions function. I met the brightest legal minds in the world, uh, and it gave you. It's a very humbling experience because you realize even if you think you know a lot at the age of
Not
24 or
really.
25, you
Yeah.
genuinely don't.
More to
So
it. Correct. Hmm.
yeah, so at that time I think at that age that sort of experience did richly contribute to whatever little experience I had at that time, and it gave me perspective to what I really want to do in life, and how commercial disputes, regardless of what we say, are much more nuanced, and there's a lot more to explore. There are a lot more to contribute. What sort of areas of law exist that I can actually critically think about and say, okay, this is wrong or this is right. So that's the kind of perspective I looked at. Immediately after that, I went on a scholarship exchange to Armenia. There I advised high tech startups on what exactly their problems are, based out of Armenia, Russia. A few of them were in Silicon Valley, and how the governance and corporate governance structure changes. How do you not do mistakes that you did earlier? What big companies are doing wrong if they started off early? What is the best practice that you can evolve? What is it that you can do to protect your business? How can you take your business forward in terms of what are the legal requirements, or what are the legal checks and balances that you need to look at, from your board to investment to protection
Right.
of IP? So that also gave me a lot more perspective on what it is. And plus, it was a scholarship exchange to Armenia, so it gave me a lot of cultural insight into how a different country functions. It's
Yeah.
a very rich heritage, rich culture. It also gave me an experience of figuring out what is it that I personally attach as a value to myself.
Right.
So that's, again, I think I see all of these things as life experiences adding on to commercial disputes. So anybody who wants to do anything in life, the function of what they end up doing is perhaps their life experiences, I believe.
Definitely. I think that's very beautifully quoted. And the way you've explained your life journey, I could imagine your different phases as on how were you basically moving on, and then what all experiences were you gauging. I'm sure there were tough times as well, but the way you quote it up so beautifully, that I think makes you a great person of who you are right now in front of us. So I think beautifully quoted and really inspiring. And I think that was very beautiful to it. You said that the more you kept meeting people of such stature, the more you kept knowing that there's more to it, and you became a forever learner. And I think that is the key in life as well today. I mean, you pick up whatever career, you pick up whatever passion, you pick up whatever. If you're open to learn at whatever given stage, I think it never stops, and you can probably be more and more to it and probably keep blooming. So I think beautifully done. So the next question that I have for you is also one more question, since you were very interestingly talking about your story. Was your family always in support of whatever you were doing, or did they always, I mean, probably add a little joke to it that probably it's the lawyer in Shruti who's speaking? So what is basically Shruti in real life versus the one who's there at her profession? Do you always keep the same aura of being a lawyer, or probably you have a subtle side to it. So I don't know. This is something that's popping up in my head, and I'm sure the audience also wants to know that. So if you can give a little insight there.
No, I think that's a very interesting question. I again, like, I'm not introspected into it. In fact, I don't even have an answer for myself. But thinking out loud, my father is also was a judicial officer. He's retired now, so in that sense, I grew up around and seeing what legal profession entails, like at least one side of it.
Right.
So it wasn't. I think it was an innate choice, or I gravitated towards it by myself or by, impliedly. But yeah, I think at home I'm the same person as I am at work. Everybody is very supportive of what I do,
Right.
and I think legal profession per se has been dominated, well, knowingly or unknowingly, by men. So in
Yes.
that sense, I think I was raised in a very feminist environment. I have a very supportive father and very, very intelligent, IIT educated mother. So
Right.
back then, she was an applied mathematician. She also taught in universities. She's a very accomplished lady in that sense, and she gave up her career to support our family and take care of my sister and I. So we were raised in a very empowering environment where we were told that you could do whatever you set your goal or aim at. You just need to know what you want to do. And I was given the freedom to choose, which I think is a very big privilege for anybody on the at the, across the globe. It's not just India, and particularly given the fact that we were in North India, and I think at that time, from what I understand now, the country was not that progressive, and there was a little bit of conservatism when it came to women. But I think I did not feel that at any point of time, and I must credit my parents for doing that and everybody around me. The schools I went to, my father had a transferable job, so I changed about at least like 10 schools.
Oh,
So the schools I went to were also very empowering. I did not see that discrimination, and even if there was, I did not let it affect me because of the environment I was raised
which
up
is
in.
hmm.
Yeah, so
I
I
think
think
that is something which is actually necessary. I mean, the environment you are brought up in and the support that you can always seek from those two pillar of supports that you have in your life. If you have that, I think sky is the limit for people like that. The ones who do not, I'm sure they find their way, they make their way. It's your
that's true.
determination and something that comes from within. But then having that kind of support, I think it makes the journey a little less difficult. I mean, the thorns are always there, but then probably it's a easy ride then.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I see how other people did perceive it because my father and my mother did not stop me from doing anything. They trusted me to take my own decisions. That there are certain things that you know which are do's and don'ts for your own self. So you have to, define it for yourself. And whatever you wanted to do, like in life, as long as you're okay and you're sure about it, and you can follow it through without jeopardizing yourself, your health, your values, and overall your safety in a very physical sense, you should be able to figure out on your own.
Okay.
And that's the kind of empowerment I had. Whereas
Right.
I knew growing up, a lot of friends of the family, relatives, or the general public, the kind of perceptions or the kind of letdowns that they would give you would be roadblocks. So my family
Right.
also supported me to realize that, other people are noise, they do not matter. You go ahead and do whatever you like to do because
Correct.
it's your life, you have to live it. So I think
Definitely.
I'm very privileged, and I hope everybody has that privilege as I had while growing up, and even today, for that matter.
Right.
My in-laws, it's the same. It's the same. Like I do not find it any different. So I think a lot of difference comes from the family you come from, how
Right.
empowered you feel, because that is a very added factor in your ability to take your life forward to a different level.
Right. Definitely. I think very beautifully quoted. And I think I'm going to re-emphasize this quote every now and then. Like you said, everybody else is just noise. It's you have to figure out what your heart wants, be zealous about it, and then keep moving. Nobody can stop you. That's really beautifully quoted. So moving on to the next question. What is the general practice of commercial disputes and international arbitration basically like? I mean, if it is for people who've not really known law, but then have always been inspired looking at maybe have had an experience of moot courts, or probably those movies really inspire when those heated up arguments and discussions are going on, and you want to be that lawyer there, and behind the screen you also start defending things and whatsoever. So how is it like?
So I'll just start because you said movies. I do not think most of us do watch Suits. I'm not sure if everybody else does.
I have tried. I think I reached up to, I think, series five or maybe sixth season is what I was there. And every time I end up watching it, I want to do more and more. I've done binge watching like how, and then I probably put myself to a stop that there's no end to it. Every time I see a new episode, I want to know more and more about it. So yeah,
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
it's
So,
addictive like how. I mean, I'm ready to compromise my sleep over that. So yeah,
oh yeah, all of us have been there. Seriously,
correct.
like that you're right about. It's very, very addictive. But yeah, commercial law disputes is nothing like Suits, although
Right.
it may appear to be. But law
Very
firm life,
fascinating.
yeah, what
Correct.
they show in the shows are not really reality. They are very, very, let's say 1% or a very zoomed out version of what life at a law firm in commercial disputes looks like. Like I said, in a law firm, you get the opportunity to work firsthand on a dispute from the start. You get to shape how the dispute functions. You
Right.
get to help your client depending on what kind of dispute is it, to make their case much better, much stronger, and ensure that think it through. When you're looking at it from top down, you see what are the issues that can happen. How can I strengthen this case? If there's a piece of evidence missing, how do I make up for it? How do I get my client the best way forward? Is it even a case that he should pursue? Is it something that they should settle immediately? Do they have any merits or not? So that's also a part of thing that you get to analyze, and I don't think that that's something which we know as a matter of fact. I'll just give a very basic of what commercial disputes exactly are. Commercial disputes are essentially disputes that come out of any transactional or any commercial relationship between two people, and that can be two individuals. For example, a lease deed. You rent a house. It's also a commercial transaction. It goes bad. The dispute between the lessee and the lessor, your landlord and you, can also be a commercial dispute. Now let's put one company and an individual in that position. Lease dispute. Oh, again, commercial dispute. Two companies being in a lease deed, again, commercial dispute. So, commercial disputes are anything from a transactional perspective. That can be a merger and acquisition, that can be an intellectual property dispute. Somebody else used somebody else's trademark or logo, or the bottle in which they sell their beverages. That can also be a commercial dispute. Shareholders disputes. Let's say you are a shareholder in a company and you want to pursue a claim against it. That's also shareholders disputes. Disputes between companies with respect to supply chain issues. That's also a commercial dispute. So anything and everything to do with, let's say, mercantile or monetary transactions that happen in the world, that all qualifies as a commercial dispute. So all of this in a very legalistic term is called private law. Unlike public law is something that is between you and government in the capacity of being the governing body in the country. So that differentiates private law disputes with public law disputes, and specifically private law disputes that involve commercial relationships are commercial disputes. Now, how are these disputes actually? What is the kind of disputes that we are looking at? This was what is that dispute? Now, what
Right.
kind of disputes that we are looking at is, for example, the range. It's not just when two parties are going to court and we are all having a day in the court. Disputes is absolutely one, like, this litigation and day in your court is one part of what disputes practice entails. Disputes practice is, like I said, it starts off with when somebody thinks, oh, I may have a problem. And it starts with, I may have a problem, and nothing like I have a problem. So they come to
Right.
a lawyer and they say, listen, look at my papers, I think something's going to happen to me. So that's pre-dispute stage. Or somebody gets a notice from someone else or wants to send someone a notice saying that, hey, my money is not somebody is not giving me my money, which is rightfully due to me under this contract. Please help me out. So that's the pre-dispute stage. So that's the advisory you give. You make strategy. How do I get that money back? And this is a very basic example. The
Right.
next stage there is, let's say, negotiation and settlement conversations. Every dispute, so nobody wants to fight, especially in a commercial matter, because money is involved, and you do not want to spend more money trying to get the money that's rightfully owed to you back. So nobody wants to fight. So the first stage that everybody tries to do is settle the dispute. If a dispute really exists, hey, why don't you give me my money? Why don't you give my client's money back? Or why don't you resolve this for my client? Why don't you do X thing that my client wants? And you should do it. So that's the stage that we start at settlement or negotiation. When that does not happen, usually parties go in for mediation. That's another way of settling disputes, and that's the matter. In the mediation, there is an informal discussion between there's a formal discussion between the parties, which is not binding on either of them, with the help of a third party called a mediator. So mediator is an independent, impartial person sitting and moderating the dispute between two parties at the level of mediation. At mediation, lawyers need not get involved. At times, lawyers are asked to leave the room so that there's more amicable settlement, less legal representative present, and mediator helps the party reach a conclusion.
Right.
The next step, if the mediation does not happen, depending on what the contract between the parties is, would be arbitration. Arbitration is a very specialized way of dispute resolution. It's a matter in which when you say dispute resolution out of court, this
Hmm.
is one of the primary methods of dispute resolution out of courts. In this, the parties decide who decides their case. For example, the party has the right, autonomy, and the power to choose the arbitrators, which are akin to judges doing arbitrations. Parties also have the opportunity to set the rules of how they're going to conduct their arbitrations. The next thing that the parties also can do is they tell what are the timelines and set it out, because when you go to
Hmm.
court, the timeline is not in your hands. The timeline depends on a lot of things. For example, the judge's time, the judge's
Hmm.
manner of looking at the dispute. Okay, what is the availability of the bench who heard your matter? So a lot of
Hmm.
things come into play. What is the caseload with the court? When is my matter going to come up next? So in that sense, parties have a lot more control, specifically in commercial transactions where monetary considerations are involved, and at times they're more time sensitive because that dispute, which there's a monetary risk that sits on your balance sheet and it affects your P&L every single time. So in that sense, arbitration is a very good method of
Hmm.
ensuring that you're doing a great a great time cost value
Right.
analysis, and then coming
Hmm.
to a dispute resolution. The decision of this arbitration is final and binding. That it cannot be appealed before any court of law. There are, of course, ways of challenging it and saying on different grounds that it is not, it is opposed to public policy, etc., etc., and setting it
Yes.
aside. But if that happens, your entire arbitration starts off again. So you can't go to a court saying that something wrong happened, and then change what they've said. But instead, you can just go in a very limited manner to say that this is something which went wrong.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and that's how you can go to court. But sometimes, if there's no arbitration, you go to courts and you settle the matter in form of recovery of money or different issues. And in India now, after 2015, there are specific commercial courts that have been established, and it's much more efficient, much more interesting to go there because you see the matters moving very quickly. So
Hmm.
overall, this is the ambit that we're looking at in terms of commercial disputes in India. There is a larger aspect of it as international arbitration. Two parties can also arbitrate their matter out of India, and that's primarily foreign arbitration. The second part also to look at is how, because of commercial, because of different transactions having increased and there are a lot of cross-border investments happening, a lot of companies invest out of India, a lot of companies do invest in India, and there's a lot more uh, global commercial relationship that gets established. So a lot of times Indian lawyers or lawyers qualified in other jurisdictions also sue parties in different locations across the globe for different reliefs before different courts and different arbitral tribunals. So that also forms a part of commercial disputes and commercial litigation. So I just give you a lot more expanse of what we do overall, and that can be any commercial disputes lawyer, not just at a law firm.
Okay. And what are the USP of such practices basically?
The USP of such practices, well, there's no set USP, but I do think it gives you a much more
Hmm.
granular insight into what a commercial transaction is, one, and second, it also gives you a much more clear picture of what. So every commercial dispute arises out of mainly a commercial relationship that went wrong, or that is
Right.
going to get wrong, or something did not absolutely go perfectly okay with that, if I may put it that way. So in that sense, the USP is to see really, really interesting matters come up. At least at a big law firm, you deal with much more complicated and complex disputes, and that gives you much more. And this is from a very personal level. I think that gives you much more confidence to see how commercial relationships operate in a very larger sense. So you think of the globe, you connect the dots between different countries. You also see how the money is flowing in, where it's flowing in, what are the reasons why something happens. If let's say one angle of commercial disputes that I also quite enjoy is that let's say there are sanctions imposed in one country and a lot of investment, and I had made a lot of investment there. Now my investment does go back, so that's also a commercial dispute where I'm going to go against a country and say that hey, I invested so much in in your country based on certain laws and regulations that you had, but now that you have sanctioned me, I can't operate my business, so I'm at loss now. Help me out, or just give me compensation.
Correct. So, like we've been talking about how the general practice really looks like. So, what are the kinds of cases lawyers usually handle at the law firms? Is it, again, is it what we see in the pictures and the movies, or what we've really heard as a layman's language? Or is it something really different to what a layman usually knows? I mean, for them, it's like coming from a very general perspective, Indian parenthood, Indian families, you know how the country really works. So anything and everything for law, they think that lawyers are usually up for a fight. Every time you give them something, they'll pick it up and take it like how. And there are heated arguments, discussions, and debates, and then it's endless. And then probably a general cliche to it that you cannot anytime win over a lawyer, and that's a lawyer sitting in front of you, so you don't hold a chance. So how is it like? What kind of cases do lawyers handle at law firms?
See, so I think law firms, at least commercial disputes, have a wide range of cases, like I mentioned. So when you look at commercial disputes, one day can look very, very different from the other in life of a commercial disputes lawyer. So specifically, and I'll restrict it to a law firm. Let's say right now I'm starting off to work on a case, and I'm just going to take one example only, where a company has a shareholder which is not letting it function properly. For example, he comes into the board meeting, raises issues. He comes into shareholders meetings, raises issues, wants to come and inspect the company's records every second day, is asking. So all of these shareholders also have rights in the company under the act, or which is the Companies Act. The shareholder also has rights under specific contractual documents that it may have entered into with the company at the time of buying those shares. Then there are also certain governance documents in the company which ensure it's like a bible for the company. If I do, how do I run my company, right? So that's also an internal document that the company has agreed to. So all of these combined together, there are different issues that have arisen. So in the same day, if I'm doing a shareholders dispute, I could be helping out that company manage that shareholders expectation to stay in compliance with the law on different aspects, to file cases for its protection, to engage in dispute, or to engage with its shareholder in settlement of an issue, or to ask and address his concerns or her concerns, to negotiate on behalf of that company with the securities regulator, which is SEBI, or at times stock exchanges, to tell them what exactly is happening. And let's say if that company has a dispute with a supplier would be, let's say, if that company is engaged in manufacturing of chemicals, and one of its ingredients supplier has some other contractual issue, for example in terms of quantity, quality, the price sensitivity. So those issues are something which you also address, and these disputes amounts can range from a very small amount to a very, very high amount, going to millions of dollars. So all of these combined together uh, would look like in a day. And honestly, when you look at these movies, they don't show you the groundwork that you have to do. And in a typical international arbitration, and that's something which we talked about earlier, there'll be loads of boxes of papers. When you see in a movie, then they say, I'm not sure which one do I quote, but they dump a lot of paperwork on you when you ask for a discovery, right? So,
Yeah.
in that sense, you must have seen the lawyers. Oh, these papers have come from them. I have to go and look at all of these documents. What have I done? So that's a normal day in a normal lawyer's life. It's not glamorous. Your day in this perhaps that everybody wants to avoid, including the clients you're representing. They do not want to go to court. they want to avoid that dispute. And that's where the dispute resolution really starts. It starts at dispute avoidance, then second it goes to dispute settlement, and when it even does not get settled, that's when you go to court. So
Yeah. Correct.
what we see is probably only the glamorous part of it. The
Correct.
non-glamorous part of it is going through loads of paperwork, trying to build a case or trying to destroy a case for that matter. And on an everyday basis, you recharge your batteries as a lawyer because there's only two ways in law: either you know it or you find out. And to
Correct.
find out, you should read more, you should figure out more. And law changes dynamically. A lot of facts change, and law is only applied, and it's as good as the facts it's applied to.
Right.
So I think what we really need to have is a show which shows how you're burning about 48 hours sitting straight going through barrage of documents. And
Correct.
yeah, perhaps you have like 5 minutes a day in court. And the practice of law requires a lot of groundwork before you actually reach up to the level where you can hold a brief very confidently and say, yes, I'm very prepared to
Right.
go and argue a case or even present a case to have a final day in my court.
Right. I think that is interesting, and it's just like it's just the tip of the iceberg of what we see, and there's a lot to it when it comes to the ground reality. So one has to be prepped up for sure. So since we've come to this question, so what are the new specializations that you see becoming practice areas in today's time?
So, new practice areas, I think a lot more emphasis has now come in on technology like
Hmm.
and fintech. There's cryptocurrencies, there's a lot more AI, NFTs, there's metaverse that's going. Uh, so, these are new areas. And law, let's say, are functions of the society, right? Like any evolution or any scientific discovery or any breakthrough that happens or any disruption in the world, law is something which just supports that new age technology, including the traditional ones that have gone on. So in that sense, the new practice areas that I can see develop and just that's my perspective would be, and it's already happening, ESG practice. There's a lot more IT and privacy law, because privacy is a very big concern for every of all one each one of us.
Right.
Like we
Very
climate change
true.
affects us personally, privacy affects us personally, technology affects us personally, because it conveniences our life, and it
Hmm.
is the need of the hour. So all of these attendant practice areas will have and will lead to attendant growth in practice areas. It's very similar to, let's say, when a new legislation is passed, for example, for money laundering, which became a very big issue when you say in the past decade, when a lot of money was laundered out of India. And there was black money legislation that was proposed to be passed for that matter also.
Yeah.
So law evolves with the need of the society, and as law evolves, the need of the society evolves. I think the practice areas also keep evolving.
Very true. I think that is very apt. So, since we are towards the last phase of the session, I would like to ask you one such question. What are certain tips, let's say three, four tips, that you would like to give to our future lawyers, or somebody who aspires to become a lawyer, or somebody who really likes, the different part of the story with what they've seen so far, or probably have been exposed to, or have somebody in the family doing it, or probably are very good with their, keeping their perspectives or their viewpoints and standing onto it. So, what are certain things that they should start practicing young for them to be successful in a career that they choose, or they become very sure that this is the right career for them?
No, I think that's a very good question. And, personally, and that's something I have believed in, success is very personal to everybody,
Correct.
and what may be success for one person would just be, that's not the kind of life I want to live.
Very.
So
Yeah.
you have to define as a person, and again, that's not very typical to law. As a person, you have to define and you have to live your life. What does success look like to you? What is the kind of life that you want to lead? And then work it backwards from there in terms of what area of law you want to choose, or do you even want to be a lawyer? And a lot of people I studied law with are either civil servants, are career judges, and sometimes
Hmm.
people have chosen not to even be a lawyer and get into business. Some people are artists now; they run their own very very successful fashion boutiques. One of my cousins, in fact, she's a lawyer. She was a lawyer for about 2 years. She's
Okay.
now moved on to fashion tech and fashion designing, and she runs her own sustainable handmade living brand, which is great. I think that's how people find their calling, right?
Right.
And as a lawyer, if you want to pursue a career in law per se, then I think the best way forward is to see what you really like to do, and what appeals to you, what is your passion, what is it that you can stay up for, let's say, more than 24 hours a day, which is unhealthy. But yeah, that's the kind of love that you need to have for
Definitely.
something.
Yeah, I
To
mean,
support you.
something that drives you crazy at 3 a.m. in the night is something that you will never get bored of. And then, probably keep exploring as much as you want to. And life is a learning. I think at every baby step you take, there's something or the other which perhaps you would get to know on your own, or probably there'll be a working experience, and you get to pick up from there.
No, that's absolutely true.
Definitely. I think very beautifully said, and very, very, in a very simplified manner, you've tried to throw some light on a topic as vast as this one. And I'm sure our students out there and people who are hearing this out will get inspired and get to know so much from that. So I must admit that your life journey and your successful achievements speak volume about you and your work that you've done in your career. We've all had plenty of takeaways and actionables to take home. Wishing you huge success, luck, and love your way, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining in. It was an absolute pleasure, and we surely look forward to hosting more sessions with you.
Thank you, Maima. Thank you, everyone. Lovely
Thank you
speaking
so
to you.
much. Good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in.